that is not necessarily a comic book, but it is related to comic books, and that is Wizard magazine. And this issue right here is the Wizard, the Guide to Comics San Diego Comic-Con 1992 special edition, released back in 1992. Company Wizard Press. President publisher was Gareb S. Shamus. Business manager Martin Schranz. Art director Cindy Sutherland. Production Douglas Goldstein. Design Eli-Har-Dof. Editor Patrick Daniel O'Neill. Assistant editor and creative director Patrick McCallum. Copy editor Daniel Schloss. And writers were Craig Cornell, Brian Cunningham, Andy Mangels, Patrick McCallum, Patrick Daniel O'Neill, and Rob Samsel. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about this issue right here. So the first year of Wizard Press, Wizard, the Guide to Comics magazine came out, and I could say just the timing was great. Marvel and DC were going strong. Valiant and Malibu were starting to shake things up in the industry. But also 1992 would become a big year in comic books, with 7 of the industry's major artists bolting from Marvel and DC in solidarity to create Image Comics and make a stand for creator-owned characters and comic books. No one publication championed this move by Image Comics other than Wizard Press. Wizard Press managed to do things and rock the industry with those coming into comics other than just reading, but for collectability and investment. Praising the variant covers, the hottest cards, the hottest toys, many people turned to Wizard magazine almost like it was the de facto Bible to what it was cool in comics, and they believed in the hype. Whatever Wizard said, people just believed everything. So could you imagine once Wizard would put a top 10 or maybe a comic book or an action figure or a card? Needless to say, a lot of people would go to their comic stores and try to find those issues. That's how influential this magazine was. Personally, I'm not sure if Image Comics, Valiant Comics, and other titles would have received much recognition if it wasn't for Wizard magazine, because Wizard was a major proponent of that. And you have to give Gareb as Shamus' son the crew credit, and in the first 2 years they read the comic market, and they succeeded and they delivered. But with that, with editorial decisions and an overfocus on artists on Image Comics, featuring artists calling out other artists and a level of sniping before social media, things got a bit, let's say, awkward. And as there were people who stayed on boat with Wizard magazine, emerged another comic book magazine, Hero Illustrated, that people wanted to be anti-Wizard in terms of coverage and what it would feature, then be a Wizard clone. It was the 90s, and those early 90s were a beast, and the comic industry did well, but no one would expect that in the mid to late 90s things would eventually crash and burn. So let's take a look at Wizard's Guide to Comics San Diego Comic-Con 1992 special edition. After a successful first year, the crew promoted what would be the biggest, largest comic book event in the country, San Diego Comic-Con. So let me see if I can get this image here. Thank you for being patient. Let's give it some time. Got the Cloudflare glow going on our website. Okay, there we go. Let's actually move this a little this way. There we go. As you can see right here, remember how this was such a big thing back then? Polybag. Yes. Anyway, while I leave that on here, the first major interview featured Stan Lee, who talked about Marvel Comics of the past and the present, 1992, and how he has come back to writing for Ravage 2099. You have to love Stan Lee's interviews. They are full of nostalgia, and if there's one man who loves comic books and is generally positive, it's him. And at the time, he was attending a lot of conventions and appearing on movies and television. And yeah, he's such an awesome person because he really loves the fans and really loves comic books and promoting them and talking about the past. That's stuff that I tend to recall of Stan Lee. The next article was by Andy Mangels, who writes about superheroes on television and movies. And then we come to the article on limited editions and how the sports card industry got into the trend of releasing special cards that collectors went crazy for and would spend $1,000 on a card. And suffice to say, nothing has changed. Things have gotten even more crazier since then. The article goes into comic books featuring various covers and how these rare covers shot up in price. Personally, when this issue came out, I bought the hype, and part of the problem of collecting comic books is that I would overspend on my budget because I thought it was necessary to purchase all the variants. To my regret, I missed out on purchasing on other comic books or missed titles in my collection because I was making that effort. Granted, I realized this a few years later and decided I'm not going to do it anymore. Can't afford to. Too many titles I would rather read, and I'm a comic book reader and not into purchasing a title just to sell it or, just get it because it has a variant cover. I did take part in that hype, but I figured, what? It became very expensive, and I was missing out on major issues, and that kind of sucked. But this issue came with 2 Prism covers featuring the popular Image Comics characters that were up and coming and featuring the artists on the back. To me, this issue was the genesis of Image Comics love from Wizard Press, and there was no turning back after that. The magazine then focused on toying around, and Brian Cunningham's article on toy collectibles, which were no doubt popular, and became my favorite section until the magazine released Toy Fair, which was my go-to magazine over Wizard years later. Then there's the hottest women, featuring the comics industry's superhero women wearing barely anything or tight spandex. Next up was Robert E. Samsel's Discovering Underrated Talent, which was a great article on up-and-coming talent that independents and big companies gave opportunities to. Hold on, everyone. I'm going to put back the original cover here that I had up. Okay. There we go. Let's bring this back right here. There we go. So, fan art was a big thing for Wizard and Amazing Art. Shows off artwork from future comic book illustrators in America. And the magazine ends with profiles of various comic book companies and trading card companies and artist profiles. And then ending with Patrick Daniel O'Neill's San Diego Comic-Con article and a map layout of the location. Overall, this was an awesome issue for its time. At $5.95, it may seem expensive, but with 2 trading cards, which had Prism, and the fact that it featured Image comic characters on the front cover, especially the Savage Dragon, you couldn't help but want to buy it. That is, if you were able to find a copy, as comic books, ordered low on Wizard magazine in those earlier years, and finding a copy was literally a pain in the butt. It gave people the opportunity to sample Wizard the Guide to Comics, and for the most part, the publication attracted a lot of attention, and people were no doubt buying this magazine. Okay, confession right here. I owned a lot of the original Wizard issues. Probably, I'm not sure if I owned number 1, but I had most of them. And I did something stupid. I went through a phase after getting married, and then, before having a kid, and I ended up taking my boxes of Wizard and Hero magazines, and the kid next door, he was getting into comic books, and I said, you know what, here's a good way to start your collection, and gave him all my Wizards. And suffice to say, who would know that later on I would miss those issues and try to buy it back and realize it was going to be difficult, because now those Wizard issues, you can find some that are, the later issues, pretty cheap, but those initial older issues are the ones that are kind of tough to find, and unfortunately that's my bad right there. So I guess that's a little regret, but I don't know if that kid ever stopped collecting or he threw all those away. I have no idea, but those Wizard issues were no doubt, instrumental in really hyping and getting me to spend a lot of money on comic books at the time. But yeah, Wizard the Guide to Comics, definitely something to check out. The special edition was, again, the genesis. This is the the genesis of Image love that the comic book magazine would have towards Image. It's just they were just inseparable at the time, and that was Wizard Comics. So that was a little nostalgic, just thinking about those days, those years. But anyway, you all take care, and I will see you later. Wink, wink, and take care, everyone. Bye bye.